Hey, good morning, everybody, or afternoon for some of you. Welcome to our Getting to D365 webinar. Just real quick, I want to make sure from one of my other colleagues, to Josh, Mariana, everybody hearing me okay?
Yep, you're good to go.
All right, excellent. All right, so again, thanks again. My name's Jeff Stone. I'm joined with Mariana Frindich, who is a senior AX developer from Merit. Each of us has been at Merit for about 4 or 5 years to see the evolution from AX 2009 to 2012 and now into D365. I'll start by saying neither of us are professional sales or marketing people, but rather we lead and work in the services group, work with our clients on implementations and ongoing support, and decided to share some of the knowledge and information we've collected recently. The goal being to foster some discussions maybe at the end, keep people talking and informed, and all of our contact information will be here at the end if you want to chat more afterwards. We'll also share this webinar, make it available to the public. I know there's a variety of different audiences here, so the goal, as you can see on this overview, I'll talk a little bit more towards the non-technical, the strategy, the planning, some of the execution and validation steps of the process, and I'll turn it over to Mariana to get a little bit further into the guts of performing the upgrades using the tools for both AX 2009 and 2012. Feel free to post questions throughout. We'll address those at the end if we have time. Otherwise, try to get back to you individually even afterwards. All right, so why are we talking about this? Actually, let me give you a couple minutes on Merit first. If you're not familiar with us, we've been working with Dynamics for many years, starting with GP and building some of the modules for Microsoft with them. In the last 6 or 7 years, it's been almost entirely AX and now D365 focus for us, primarily the D365 for operations. Currently working on our 6th or 7th D365 implementation. A lot of good traction this year, partnering up with Microsoft in some of their beta programs and such, even with some of the newer modules. We do have some IP around life sciences, something called Rapid 365, which I'll touch on for a few minutes. We offer support, ongoing support as well as implementations. We have a mobile and integration team as well that does a lot of good work, and we have offices in both U.S. outside of Chicago and in Europe as well. Okay, so why are you all here today, right? Why are we talking about upgrading? Why now? A few years, I'll start with a story, which is basically a few years ago, as we were trying to convince some of our AX 2009 clients to move to 2012. It was admittedly a hard sell, and many of them chose not to proceed with it. We just weren't able to necessarily give the benefits that they needed, knowing that these upgrades are not a fun project. Starting with R3, when that was introduced, definitely some additional functionality that came around and made it a little bit easier with some of the modules that they incorporated into R3. But I'll start by saying, as a person helping consultants to implement the AX 2012, I was a little disappointed in the 2012 product and overall the way that it evolved from 2009. And you saw glimpses of mobile apps or Excel and BI improvements, but it just never got to where I thought the potential was. I'll say I feel completely different about the D365 product. I mean, I think Microsoft has got it right, or at least they're getting it right. It seems to be night and day user experience for some of the folks that have traditionally only worked in other ERP systems or in even the AX 2009 or 2012. Things like even presenting the roadmap. I mean, we'll share some links afterwards at the end of this, some references. But one that I don't even know if we have on our list is roadmap.dynamics.com. And they're showing you, in real time what features are being added and what's being planned for this. And you can see the investment that's going into it. Something like the talent module is much improved. Again, we're in that early adopter program, Merit is for that, and we're getting some nice feedback from our clients and prospects. That truly is a standalone app, but it's also incorporated with the rest of the ERP and CRM and Power BI. So again, the user experience I think is kind of night and day. To me, the biggest improvement is in those built-in analytical applications, the dashboards, the Power BI starting points, and especially with this spring release, they call it spring release, but came out in July, I believe. You'll see, and I have a couple of screenshots here. It's not just the financials, but all the modules. There's a definite push for a better user experience. So that's obviously one of the big reasons people are moving. Cloud platform is another. This is something, again, 3-4 years ago we were having to fight battles with clients about potentially moving to the cloud or doing some type of hybrid approach. I don't get those same concerns anymore. It seems to be just a way of life for IT directors and others. The pay-as-you-go licensing model, not having to manage that data center and upgrade the hardware and keep all of those different skill sets intact in your department, worrying about disaster recovery. There's a ton of, I'm not going to go into a whole cloud lecture here, but a lot of benefits to doing so. I will say that, the software as a service model, you'll see some things that make it sound like you don't have to worry at all about IT ever again. And we'll talk about that a little bit, but there are definitely still some considerations of how you, and some skills that you'll want to have in-house or through your partner to support even something that is cloud-based. There is also an on-premise hybrid model that's in the works or coming soon. We have not necessarily touched that too much. I know there's certain use cases or regions of the world where keeping the data on-premise is desired. So there will be, if not already, an on-premise offering of D365. More of a hybrid approach, though. It'll still be web-based. You'll just be running it on a local IIS server instead of on the cloud. And there may even be some limitations of the functionality from what I'm hearing. Just a couple other things. I mentioned the unified experience. So D365 now, if you go online, Microsoft will say it's AX and CRM and Power BI and machine learning and all these different things together, which is the vision for sure, and they're getting there. There's been definite improvements with the common data model that we'll talk about a little bit, with being able to integrate between those systems. I will say, as of right now, there are still 2 different installs when you go through this, and when you install AX and CRM, and you have to make them talk to each other. So it's not quite technically caught up with the vision yet, but it's getting there, and they're making improvements every day. So most of this presentation is going to be about the upgrade process. Here's just one quick slide. This is from the spring release. This was a sampling of all the different Power BI workspaces that came with the release. And you can see there's production, warehousing, fixed assets, recruiting and employee development, sales, procurement, credit collections, cash flow. So every area, when they're releasing an area, a module, they're making a point to push it out with the corresponding reporting and workspaces, which I think in the past was somewhat of an afterthought. And these are customizable with pretty minimal IT effort, as long as the data has been published for the right usage. So we'll talk towards that a little bit in a moment. I will say one of the considerations of going through an upgrade is whether you should upgrade or re-implement completely. And I could talk about this for another hour, but just to touch on it briefly, if you're not happy with your current environment, if you have processes that aren't ideal or even just data structures, Merit does have a product we call Rapid 365, which is built on best practice models and trying to get something deployed quickly that is not dissecting every possible way to do every transaction in the system. We go with some of the best practices. We have 120 something process models that we can deploy quickly with the configurations that go with it and give you that starting point, and hopefully only tweak it a little bit to get the implementation how you want it to be. So if you're interested more in that, if you're not necessarily looking to upgrade but think maybe a re-implementation is a better fit, we can certainly talk about that more, or you can visit our website and see some of that material. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the upgrade. And really the main purpose of this slide is to make you realize that this is a project. It needs to be planned. This isn't upgrading your iOS version on your phone overnight. This is an investment that the business is going to have to be involved into. It's not just an IT project. And we're going to touch mostly, when I hand it over to Mariana, around the data and the code, the technical pieces. But I wanted to just point out that there's a lot more to it. The decision of migrating versus upgrading, and how much of that legacy data you decide to keep is a very big thing to be thinking about. This is an opportunity to start fresh potentially. We do, as Mariana will show later, tend to recommend bringing over balances, master data, open transactions, but not every historical transaction you've ever done, if that's something that you're able to do. Let's see. There's considerations around infrastructure and security, as we'll talk about in a moment. The Azure world, obviously integrations and BI, there's some challenges that I'll talk about, and then cutover planning as well is a big one. But I did want to just point out that there are opportunities, even if you're doing an upgrade, to reassess some things, to improve your business processes along the way. And this is a slide I took from our rapid model, but the same, we'll say, phases or steps will occur where you're going to need to work on setting up environments. You're going to need to look at data migration. You're going to have process workshops or process discussions as well. As new functionality has been released, how do you take advantage of it? How do you get rid of some of your customizations and use the standard functionality, or do something that's just more flexible and meets your current business needs? I'm not going to go too far into this. I mean, you can see at the end you have obviously testing and go live. The closure activities are sometimes the hardest part, with all the different phase 2 and nice to have things that you want to have on a project like this, on an upgrade or a migration. So I'll just put caution there that you make sure you have those clear milestones with your team, because Microsoft is adding new things every day, and it's easy for that scope to just keep expanding. But just kind of a word of wisdom there to get that scope, get the actual migration done, and you can always add to it later on, and take that opportunity to celebrate the milestone and the win. All right, so just to go a little bit further into the infrastructure security. This move to the cloud is a huge jump for many companies. I remember a few years ago we were doing AX 2012 implementations in Azure, and it wasn't software as a service, but there's still some of those challenges of working closely with Microsoft to implement the configurations and syncing the local Active Directory up to Azure. Not every partner, not every Dynamics partner has a cloud services group like Merit does that can kind of guide you through that. So definitely a word of caution there, that you're going to have IT architecture decisions to be made with how you connect, some security aspects. And then even though the production environment is a software as a service in D365, meaning it's kind of a black box, you pay licensing and you're off and going, the non-production environments are still up to the client or partner to manage. So refreshing your test environment, and even technically turning things on and off, because Azure you're paying by the minute. So at Merit we help our clients, and even our own internal Azure environments, we have scripting in place to turn the systems off every night so that we're not paying from 5 p.m. to 3 a.m. in the morning when we're not using it, or whatever it might be. So those are just some of the considerations in this cloud world of how this is working. Another one is, if you're moving from 2009 especially, the licensing becomes a named model, where in 2009 it was concurrent licenses. Beyond that, even in 2012, there's some slight differences with the full users versus device or task users. There's different names for them now, but the licensing model does shift. So you need to have that assessment. Merit can help you with that. Microsoft can help you with that to figure out how that translates from your current licensing to the new model. And especially if you're going from 2009, in 2009, all security was basically customized. There weren't out-of-the-box roles. So that mapping of what you're doing today to what standard roles you're hopefully able to take advantage of, that's a big piece of the puzzle too. The pricing, I think most of you are aware, or it's public knowledge, but those per license charges do range pretty drastically. I mean, the all-in license with AX and CRM is just over $200 a month, and you can go all the way down to a $10 a month per user task license that's just submitting expense reports or approving workflows. The other aspect, before we get into the actual upgrade tools that I wanted to talk about quickly, are integrations, third-party products. The important thing to consider when you're talking now about moving to the cloud is that you're not going to be able to access that production AOS server or SQL database directly. So in the past, where you may have had a folder on the AOS server and then a batch job in AX that was just looking every few minutes to see if a file hits that folder and importing it into AX, that's going to have to be re-engineered. You literally will not have access to the production AOS and SQL server, so you'll have to use more of a hub, is what we're calling it, an Azure File Hub. So a separate server in your Azure environment that is separate and given rights to outside systems and interaction, but then only interacts back through the AX through APIs to push files or push data even. So that's a definite concern of how you go about doing that. Your ISVs may have similar requirements of having to have a new file processing server if you're doing e-banking or EDI. You may be able to tap into that for some of your own custom stuff, but that's, again, just another consideration out there as you're looking at the architecture piece of the puzzle. If you're pulling data directly from your SQL server today, you'll have the same challenge. You're not going to have that access to point a access database to SQL tables. The good thing about D365 is that it comes with basically a secondary database that's being populated in real time to be hit for those analysis purposes. So you don't have to point, and it's never a good practice anyway to have somebody running an access query against your production sales order table. So the idea now is that with D365, they're kind of keeping this secondary database in sync, pretty much real time, and then all of your analysis, your data entities pull from that and get exposed into these Power BI dashboards like you're seeing here. So they've done some great things with it, but it will potentially require rewriting custom queries and reports that you've done in the past that are hitting directly the database. A couple other quick things to note. I mentioned the CRM to AX link is getting better every day, so there's a common data model is what we're calling it, or what Microsoft is calling it, to help with some of those integration points where you may create a customer in CRM and have it push over to the operations AX side and be available. I will say that there are still some limitations in that. The idea of virtual companies, where you may have shared that data between companies before in AX, is not in D365. So we've had to come up with some creative ways potentially to have, let's say, CRM be your master record for customers, but push that to multiple, AX operations companies. So again, it's a work in process. It's improving every day, but there's still some technical work to be done there. Oh, sorry about that. I think that may be the main points before we get into the actual upgrade tools specific to 2009 and 2012. Like I said, my contact information is at the end. I'll chime back in a little bit after Mariana does her thing on the development side. And with that, maybe Josh, we can switch it over to Mariana to present for a moment.
Yeah, hello everyone.
Hey, Mariana.
Okay, so I will get more technical now, and starting with the upgrade path. So the upgrade path will heavily depend on the following. So AX version that we are upgrading from and the tools availability. So if we are upgrading from the AX 2009 to D365, we have the data migration tool available right now, whereas the code upgrade tool and the data upgrade tools are not available. So if we're upgrading from the AX 2012 to D365, the data upgrade tool currently is available only for the R3 version. On the roadmap, we have R2 following and the RTM only following next. But we have the code upgrade tool available as well. So we definitely need to consider the volume of the customizations implemented. For example, whether it will be code reimplementation or the code upgrade. So this would depend on the code itself, specifically how the customizations were implemented in the first place. One other thing to consider is the database size, whether it will be data migration or the data upgrade. So data migration means that we would only transfer configurations, master data, balances, and open documents, and leaving the history completely behind. So no transactional data. Versus the full data upgrade, where all the transactional data is moved to the D365. So when we are considering the code upgrade, typically for the AX 2009 approach, we would get approached with a redesign of customization. That's simply due to the significant changes in the code and the data model, apart from not available tool for the code upgrade. So you should definitely revisit each functionality and determine whether it should be replaced with a new D365 feature or possibly completely re-implemented. So here the good documentation and the customizations implemented would come really handy for this process. So definitely address changes in BI and reporting. As Jeff already mentioned, so cubes are no longer supported. They're replaced with aggregated data measures. And external reports with direct link to database are no longer available. Additional consideration regarding the integration and the ISVs. Regarding the ISVs, talk to your partners. Let them provide you with the up-to-date version of their code, so re-implement versus trying to update. As it comes to the data migration for the 2009, I mentioned that there is a tool available, and it's actually entity-based and the export-input method model. So here we perform the cutover, transfer metadata, master data, configuration balances, and open documents, anything that has an entity. So as I mentioned, excluding any historical transactions. So for any customizations to a standard data model, we should extend standard entities to support those customizations. And we need to create new custom entities for custom tables and or anything that's anything non-historical that is not supported out of the box. Also related to securities, which is pretty much a great thing. User groups to security roles transfer is possible and is available in the data migration tool. Actually will be available with the full release of the data migration tool. It's based on the migration of mappings of the user groups to security roles and association to the users. That's very helpful again. So here we have the DMT high-level architecture. This diagram shows the overall process of the migration. So starting with the AX 2009 database, we export the data using the Data Export Input Framework service and exported it to Data Migration Tool or to export directly to some Excel file or the text file or XML file. Here we perform some additional mappings and transformations, and the output of this is the data package that is the input to data migration to Dynamics D365 for finance operations. This can be a one-step or a two-step process, so pushing it directly to D365 or to some kind of file storage and then additional mapping or transformations can be performed. So installing the tool adds a new module in AX, that's data migration area, and also installs Data Input Export Framework service. This is also already known, it's announced with AX 2012. So here we perform all of the setups. So starting with selecting which company to migrate. We need to configure parameters for both source side and the target side. Using the data provided for the source and the target, the system can identify the list of the source tables and the list of the target entities. and automatically recognize any mappings for most of the entities. Also, here we are setting the conversions for EDPs and enumerators. We set, in addition to this, financial dimensions, inventory dimensions that are used for each company, as we know that the concept of chart of accounts is significantly changed starting from AX 2012. So we need to define chart of accounts for each legal entity, shared or one-on-one, and configure the ledger. So this also requires some manual steps to be taken on the target side, like creating new legal entity, creating ledger, fiscal calendar, and address book, basically anything that is new in the D365 and does not have corresponding entity in the source side. So here we have the entity list displayed. That's actually the main screen where majority of work is done with many useful functionalities, as we can see here. One of many is the discover function, which actually discovers tables with custom modifications in the data, and we can select which entity to migrate or not. So you can see the entities included, and details like source table, target entity descriptions. You can browse and edit field mappings. Next, you create a migration group, which defines which entities are being migrated. And finally, exporting the data is pretty much straightforward, as it's already seen in AX 2012. Allows you to break loads to chunks per modules per legal entities, or any other logical groupings. So incremental run is also available. However, it must be set for each entity. And the output is the data package, which we can also choose whether to push directly to the target, or we can just export to a file path, like here. So finally, we get to the AX 2012 approach. Here we have the high-level overview. So we can see that analysis phase includes some environment preparation steps, like sign up to LCS, set up the project methodology, deploy demo environments that are needed to identify gaps. Then we have the estimation steps. These will include running the upgrade analyzer tool, system diagnostics, and code upgrade estimation tool. So in general, data gathered from the estimation steps and identified and estimated gaps will be used to create a project plan, which is an output of the analysis phase. Then we have the execution phase, which generally consists of preparation tasks. So performing the preparation tasks that are identified in the analysis phase and the pre-upgrade checklist, code upgrade, and the data upgrade itself. This leads us to a validation phase where comprehensive testing is done, functional as well, and production will cut over, finally, the go live. So following, I will run through the key steps of the upgrade process. So system diagnostics, generally the upgrade analyzer is the LCS tool, which identifies the tasks that you should do to prepare the AX 2012 environment so that the upgrade goes smoothly and less expensive. It collects the data from specified AX 2012 environment and provides reports with detected issues and recommendations on how to solve it. So here we see the observations and the recommendations, some screenshots. Again, preparation tasks include data cleanup, which identifies data that we can remove without causing any loss of functionality, such as cleanup of sales update history, bad job history similar, or similar. Then we have the SQL configuration, which reviews SQL configuration recommends for optimizations. This helps in reducing the time required for upgrade in the live process. And there is also the deprecated features, so which identifies features you are currently using but aren't available in D365. So apart that it's discovering gaps in the other stage, it also provides suggestions for the alternatives. For instance, here's the one example. So the alert feature is deprecated. We recommend not to use email reminders, but instead utilize workspace feature with information that user needs at the time that they need it. Or another one, the database log feature is deprecated in D365, so will not longer be or will not function in D365. Also, user log is now replaced with activity log reporting, so that's now available from the LCS monitoring environment, and so on. So then we have the code upgrade estimation tools. Again, this is the LCS tool that provides some insight into how easy or difficult the upgrade path will be. This can be also run prior to making any decision. That's in the evaluation phase. So it takes the code from AX 2012 by exporting the model store from AX 2012 and then uploading it as the zip file to LCS, which then converts it to a new format and provides feedback about conflicts that the developer must resolve later. So this step forms the basis for the estimate of the cost of your code upgrade. So again, this is only the estimate. For more precise estimate, the developer must definitely get into the updated code, not the updated code, but the code that is converted, and see how much of the customization is actually overlaid versus we need to have extensions. I will talk about this on the next slide. So here is an example of the reports provided. For example, task list per element, showing many useful things, as well as migration summary, which have variety of useful information, such as elements converted to extensions and elements converted which failed, remaining overlaying, code upgrade report and errors and so on. So basically the output of the code upgrade service is designed to be consumed by a D365 developer, and it helps the developer to estimate the effort required for code upgrade tasks. So the developer is the one that will provide the estimate for the effort. Next, I would like to talk just a little bit more on the architecture. I think that several points are worth of mentioning. So D365 architecture has been designed to be modular. Layers are not as important as they were earlier. So first of all, why the modularizing the application? Because of the build duration. It takes less time to build parts versus the entire application. So some key concepts are shown on a diagram here. So package is a deployable solution that contains one or more models and have interdependencies with other packages, at least the platform. So model, it's a logical grouping of the elements. This is the same as it was in AX 2012. And then the project, it's associated with one and only one model and contains elements from that model. So we can see here that D365 consists of 3 separate models: application platform, application foundation, and the application suite. So Microsoft sealed platform and the foundation model, and soft sealed the application suite model. And the application suite model will be hard sealed in spring release 2012. What this actually means is that overlaying is not possible for those models, only extensions can be used. So there are many benefits though for extensions versus overlaying. Extensions models simplify and improve the performance of the deployments and delivery to customers. So from the upgrade side, unlike over-layering, extensions reduce the cost of upgrading to a new version, eliminating costly codes and metadata conflicts, which allows for faster updates and cheaper upgrades. And that's huge, really huge benefit. So also from the servicing side, in the cloud, Microsoft can install, patch, upgrade, and change internal APIs without affecting your customizations. So definitely faster updates and cheaper upgrades, huge. So with all this, to recap, the amount of work that is required in order to change an implementation from overlayered code to extensions depends on the code itself, definitely. Some overlayered code can be changed relatively seamlessly. However, for some changes, a serious redesign is required to accomplish it through extensions. So therefore, it can be a major undertaking to change complete solutions where multiple places have been overlaid. But the upside of this investment is a more seamless upgrade process going forward, so because customizations are now based on the extensions. So going forward, really click, and we're updated, just like that. So prerequisite for code upgrade is to have configured lifecycle services project and connected to Visual Studio Team Services. The code upgrade service creates a new branch and checks in the upgraded code to your Visual Studio Team Services project. After the code is merged, all conflicts resolved, and the code upgraded, we're good to go with the data upgrade. So, first of all, we need to install appropriate hotfix on the AX 2012 side for the pre-upgrade checklist. So there's several steps to complete, among which are validate baseline version, which actually check whether the current AX version can be upgraded at all. Then we have the prepare model metadata. Goal here is to maintain element IDs between existing AX 2012 and the upgraded C365 environment. Because the element IDs are stored in separate database than the business database. Actually, it's in the AX model database, model element table. This step will actually replicate this table into the business data database. Similar to this one, security role metadata. The goal is to preserve the security role assignments, actually by copying security role information as well from the AX model to AX database. Significant to mention, user mapping. This one will map existing AX 2012 users to equivalent Azure AD users, either by importing from AX or from a file. This will enable current users to log into the new environment, to new D365 environment using their Azure accounts, so Azure Active Directory accounts. Finally, we get to the upgrade, to the data upgrade. So after the code upgrade tasks are completed, the data upgrade is to be performed in a development environment. Typically, this is a one-box environment. Why the development first? So this helps reduce the overall time spent on iterations of the data upgrade process. So in a development environment, an issue can be debugged immediately, code can be adjusted, and the upgrade can be rerun within minutes. However, the larger sandbox environments don't allow for this level of agility. In those environments, a minimum of several hours will be required to debug and remediate issues. So, and to rerun the upgrade. So here we see the flow in the database development environment. Performing the data upgrade in the sandbox environment where the business user and functional team members will test business processes by using the upgraded environment, both data and code. This is needed due to the infrastructure being similar to the production environment. So data upgrade process will reflect more accurately the duration of each task, and since the business will enforce a limit of the amount of downtime that is allowed, some optimization tasks and tuning the data upgrade process may be required to meet that downtime limit. So flow in the sandbox environment is similar to the development environment, except that the different file format for the backup of the database, specifically backpack versus the back file, and that's the adequate database format for the Azure SQL. The backpack is uploaded to the Azure storage and then imported to Azure SQL. Then we have the cutover to go live in the production environment. Here the diagram shows some more activities. So this one differs from basic data upgrade in the following ways. So during the downtime, neither AX 2012 nor the D365 will be available. So AX 2012 database isn't copied, but it's only backed up, and then the original database is modified. This is a faster approach. This is faster, and the backup provides also rollback if the rollback is required. So because the production environment has restricted access, the tasks that were previously performed on the sandbox instance are now performed by the Microsoft dedicated support engineering team. These tasks include download and import to Azure SQL and then running the TSQL scripts, and then executing the data upgrade. After the data upgrade is completed, smoke tests should be performed, additional application setup tasks completed, such as configuration of the new application functionality. And definitely users should be notified that the upgrade is completed and that they can use the system again. Also, important to mention, in addition to suggested approach, we can also do all the work there's the other approach. We can also do all the work in the sandbox and have Microsoft dedicated support engineering team move the upgraded database to production. This is only if the duration of the data upgrade process meets the business's downtime limitation. Following are some more screenshots of the actual data upgrade process. You first need to download the appropriate version of the data upgrade tool from the LCS, that is major version data upgrade. Then you need to collect the data for topology and generate runbook from that topology. So the runbook provides a sequence of steps that must be run to update the environment. You can see here the example. So the execution of the runbook actually updates status of each step in the runbook after it is run and logs information, which are very useful in case of the step failure. If errors occur during any step, you can debug the script instructions in the step and act accordingly. You can rerun any step, resume execution. You can also choose to skip any step, which is also very useful for the first run and for the development environment. So here we have the example of the rerun of the step and changing the status. Also, some of the issues you may run into, like all instances of Visual Studio must be closed. This is typical for the dev environment. Try convert is not recognized built-in function name. This is resolved with setting the compatibility level of the database to match the SQL instance version. For example, 130 previously was 100. So, and many others. This is well covered on the documentation available on the internet. So to tell you more about how to view more details about the script errors. So upgrade scripts are running in X++ using a batch process that the runbook installer is starting. So there are classes you can view in the Application Explorer in Visual Studio prefixed with release update. If an upgrade script fails, you can discover more details about the reason for the error by opening SQL Server Management Studio and querying the release update script error log table. It's possible to take the code and add it to a new runnable class in Visual Studio and directly observe, debug, and if needed, rework its behavior. Regarding the info on the duration of script execution, you can refer to release update script log table, specifically column duration mins, which record the amount of time in minutes for each successfully executed script. Keep in mind that pure summation of tasks duration will not reflect the actual state due to the tasks being executed in parallel. And then once we have all the steps executed with the status completed, we can continue with the validation phase. So this is actually how it looks like when all the steps are completed. This would be all from my side, and handing over to Jeff now.
Awesome. Thanks, Mariana. You can certainly tell your passion and your experience with this stuff. I know for some of us, we're going to have to go back through this and watch it a few times to catch all those details. But hey, we'd rather throw too much in an hour than not enough at everybody. So great job. Just a couple final things to think about, I guess, as we're planning and going through these. Again, with the testing process, I want to just hint on that a little bit to make sure you start that early on and think about all the different integrations, business flows, and reporting outputs, not just the transactions and data. Even though it's very complex, those are areas where using the tools Microsoft has, you should end up feeling pretty confident once you understand everything Mariana was showing that we'll get that part right. But how you redo customizations, re-engineer business flows and things like that, just want to make sure that that's noted, that that's an area that should be thought about up front and have all those test cases in place to be able to verify those. The other thing we started talking about a little bit, the cutover, and she mentioned two different approaches basically of doing things in the sandbox and moving that over, or basically putting right into production. Either way, there's some other types of validation tasks that you can be thinking about and other considerations. Typically, we'll be talking about row counts when you're looking at master data and spot checking that you have all the addresses for certain vendors, along with confirming things like trial balances match in the legacy and the new environments. So similar to other implementations or upgrades, there's those types of testing that you'd want to refer to. The other thing, though, is to think about the manual cutover processes. And a good example maybe is how to handle your open AP. So most clients might bring over open invoices, the vendor and GL balances, on-hand inventory, but not maybe all of the historical purchase orders and receipts. So if you already received a PO but you haven't paid it yet, you're not going to be able to do a three-way match in the new system if you don't have the receipt in that system. So things like that, those are the gotchas we see that we try to talk through your manual processes in those situations. I've actually seen it done different ways. I've seen it where it just had to happen. We had to have a 3D match in the system, so we ended up bringing over open purchase orders that had already been received and then processing the receipt in them. And then, taking out the quantity again because it's already referred to in your opening inventory balance. So hopping through 4 or 5 different steps so that then at the end the invoice could have a true three-way match to a receipt transaction. So business cases will dictate how that works, but this are the types of things you want to be thinking about when you're doing cutover planning. It's not just the technical aspects, but how people are going to do their jobs every day. And kind of a final topic here is just the expect the unexpected. Something will come up, and as referred to earlier, it's not just a IT project, but that need from the users to really assess from the beginning, help test throughout, is a definite area of emphasis. And I'll say, there's a lot of technical aspects to this that Mariana showed, but hopefully it doesn't scare you off too much. We're seeing from clients that it's worth it for them, especially the folks that have been on 2009 and have been looking for this moment, or now are maybe having real thoughts of not being supported soon. So I can say I haven't been more excited to be, we'll say, hitched up with Microsoft than I am these days. And if you have any other questions, I'll go ahead and take a look and see what's out there right now. But otherwise, we have a handful of references here. May even add a few more to this before we shoot this out to everybody. And then my contact information. Mariana's is there as well. I did want to mention that Merit's going to be at the summit in Nashville shortly, and so anybody that'd like to come by the booth, I'll personally be there, along with quite a few others from our company. And at this time, Josh, maybe you just want to confirm if there's any. It doesn't sound like there's any immediate questions